The Chiefs are top 10 in the NFL on offense. So they bought themselves another week of, maybe they are better than what they've shown. Thornton should be one of the primary foundational parts of their game plan. He's shown he's a legitimate deep threat. Look, Pacheco's in a tough spot. He literally turned the wrong way both times. That's really rough. With Hunt and Pacheco, you check down to them, it's like a 3-yard gain. I want to see more from the front four pass rush. It's the same thing. This game is essentially a coin flip. If they continue to shoot themselves in the foot, you're not going to be able to hang around quite the same way you did against the Giants. I'm one more miss away from being full-blown nervous. We'll see if it turns into a yip situation, because when that happens, it happens fast.
So in today's video, I have an awesome conversation with Seth Kaiser of KCSN as we break down the last couple of games from the Kansas City Chiefs, biggest takeaways, concerns, and positives to draw from as the Chiefs get ready to take on a very tough Ravens opponent week 4. So let's talk about it. But first, how about those? All right, Seth, it's been a couple weeks since you were on the channel, but since then, the Chiefs have lost to the Eagles in a game where it was winnable, if not for some self-inflicted wounds. They then did beat the Giants after one of the ugliest halves we've seen from two teams probably together, but for sure the Chiefs, at least that second quarter. I mean, it was just awful. They turned it around, almost scored or had the opportunity to score on almost every drive in the second half. They didn't. One was a miss to Thornton on 3rd and 1, which we'll probably talk about. And then the other one was near the end of the game. I think it was literally like a 3 and out. But how are you feeling about the state of the Chiefs as we get ready for Ravens on Sunday? And we could obviously bounce your thoughts through film study and stuff over the last couple of weeks and just kind of touch on both sides of the ball.
The things that were going wrong in the first half, you had to sit there and ask yourself whether this is fixable. In terms of some of the execution issues that we were seeing, in terms of some of the overall way that the offense, just everything was so painful. If you look at their first 4 drives against the Giants, when you look at it not on a per play basis, but when you look at it on like a drive basis, and you look at the results of that drive, they were averaging like 3.2 yards per play when you take, plays on the drive, how far you got on the drive, which takes penalties into account. And the problem with taking penalties into account, of course, is you have Josh Simmons gets flagged for a hold. He's trying to hold down Brian Burns. It's a really tough matchup, one of the toughest he'll see all year. That erased a 20-yard gain to Noah Gray. And then even worse, another illegal formation penalty on Jawan Taylor results in losing a 3rd and 14 conversion. Where these things are so crucial is you'd have had the ball 1st and 10 on the Giants' 21-yard line. You're cooking with gas. You're in scoring position. Now you are barely on the fringe of field goal range, and you're facing 3rd and long, or even longer is 3rd and 22 or something like that. And so they just do a quick 10-yard gain to Noah Gray just to kind of get yards, and that it affects the play call. It affects everything. You try to kick a field goal. It all looked systemic. There were certain things that showed some promise, but then didn't pan out, and then there were certain things that just didn't look like they had promise at all. And I really was ready to man, is this just who they are on offense? Very same game, they started to pull it together. They averaged like 3.2 yards per play on their first 4 drives. Their last 5 drives, you get 253 yards on 36 play. That's a shade over 7 yards per play. And again, that includes like a big penalty when you're throwing downfield to Hollywood Brown. But the thing is, that's systemic, because when you throw the ball down the field, you are more likely to get those results. You're more likely to get that 50-yard penalty or whatever. And that's one of the reasons why throwing the ball down the field is encouraged in today's NFL, because it used to be, when the quarterback throws the ball down the field, 3 things can happen and 2 of them are bad, is the old expression. It's a catch, a deflection, or a pick. Well, no, a penalty is a good thing too. And so it's more of a 50-50 thing. And so the difference between 3.2 yards per play and 7 yards per play is dregs of the NFL versus pretty much upper tier. And everything, it wasn't just that it was so much more efficient, and it looked so much cleaner. And so that was really encouraging following an Eagles game. When you and I talked about the Chargers game, the offense overall had performed better against Minter's defense than they did last year. So we were kind of encouraged by that. Then the Eagles game happened, and the offense just looked so stuck in the mud, self-inflicted errors left and right. So seeing them minimalize those self-inflicted wounds and seeing the offense look efficient and moving well after that was really encouraging for me. So they bought themselves another week of, maybe they are better than what they've shown. Because the funny thing about the Chiefs right now, if you go by expected points added per play, the Chiefs are top 10 in the NFL on offense. They're like 6th. In success rate, they're 10th. The funny thing is their bad plays have been so bad. The Kelsey one being the most obvious, an overshoot by Mahomes to Thornton here and there, a drop by Thornton here and there, a Juju drop on third down. I mean, they've been so devastating that it's slowed down the entire offense. So then the question is, can you stop shooting yourself in the foot? And can you incorporate some of the things that you did well against the Giants in the second half moving forward and kind of, why don't they just build the whole plane out of, runs from under center type thing?
On that note, before we get to some other stuff, just to tag on what you said at the end there, runs under center. Can we just talk about the run game, what you've kind of seen from it, and what you hope to see either different or to be built upon based on what you've seen from, we know the first couple of weeks, Mahomes led the room in rushing by double. Didn't really do that last week. Didn't need to. I don't think. I hope it was really an emphasis of him not intentionally just not doing it and trying to fire a little bit more. But what are your thoughts on the run game? There have been mess ups. Yeah. There's been backwards passes that Mahomes saved. The run game is still one of the least explosive rooms in the NFL right now. What are your take on that after kind of looking at the film and just seeing the state of the room so far through 3 weeks? All right, before I get to the rest of this interview with Seth, I did want to give you 3 of my favorite picks for this upcoming game between the Chiefs and Ravens, thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Underdog, the best and easiest place to play fantasy sports. I'm going to opt for Derrick Henry getting a rushing touchdown. I mean, he's done this in 6 of his last 7 games that he's played in, going back to last year, so hit the higher. Then I'm going to hit the higher on Kelsey's 3.5 receptions, something he's done 2 out of 3 times this season, but also 8 of the last 9 games of the 2024 season, including the playoffs. Next, I just feel like Patrick Mahomes is due for a couple of passing touchdowns, so hit the higher on his 1.5. At least that's what I'm doing. He nearly had 2 last week. And honestly, this is more of a gut feeling that I have than anything else, considering this needs to be a higher scoring game for the Chiefs to win, yes, but also because the Ravens defense is struggling and giving up 32 points per game on average so far. And if these 3 picks hit, you can win up to 3.31x on your money. So you can either tail these or choose higher or lower on your favorite player stats to win up to 1,000x on your money. Shoot, for fun, I even did this high risk 2-legger where just $5 can win up to 780 if Tyquan Thornton scores the first touchdown and Derrick Henry fumbles again in this game. So join in on the fun on Underdog and play responsibly, of course, where any new signup who uses my code HBTC can play just $5 and get $100 in bonus funds plus a gimme pick in the lobby. It was play 5, get 50. They've now doubled that, so join in while you can.
When they're executing inside zone or they're executing certain kinds of power-based looks where they're moving the ball straight ahead through the tackles, running north-south, they've been pretty successful with that. Where they haven't been as successful, an easy example to pick on would be that 4th down failure against the Eagles, is when they're trying to get horizontal and they're trying to get to the sideline. That hasn't worked for them. And part of that is Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt, especially Hunt, they're not explosive enough to win races to the sidelines.
He hasn't bounced back like I thought he would from a speed perspective. It looked like he would. But then the vision stuff, it seems like he has gotten a little bit worse. You saw that article maybe from Albert Breer or whoever it was of ESPN that the Chiefs are almost puzzled by the lack of what they've seen in the run game.
And that's not what you want to hear.
Yes, exactly. So what can the Chiefs do? You broke down a couple ways they found success. They've also did like a couple jet sweeps. You had Nico, you had Brashard Smith. I liked them kind of doing that a little bit. I feel like they've gone away from that. And I don't know if it's just because of the lack of players and their ability to do it, but I'm like, you ran... The Nico one to me worked because nobody ever expected that to get handed off to Nico Remigio. People on in the defense were probably like, who even is this? Which was really cool. But what are your thoughts on how they can maybe do something like incorporate some of this stuff moving forward, maybe even against the Ravens, given some of their injuries along the D-line? A couple key starters are not going to most likely be playing.
Running the ball north-south between the tackles, straight ahead, take advantage of the lighter boxes that you have. You're not taking advantage of a lighter box if you're going side to side because there's more speedy defenders on the field. There's more guys, on the boundary, all that stuff. And also their tackles are their weaker spots in run blockers. Simmons shows some potential. But he's got some work to do in generating movement. He's more upper body power than lower body power, so he doesn't drive even the way like Suamata Ia does, who, by the way, has looked a little better every week. We'll see if that keeps up, but that's been nice.
That's the hope, yeah.
So you really take advantage of Smith, Creed, Kingsley, and their ability to move bodies. And you can see this on multiple plays against the Giants, where they had some combo blocks where they took Dexter Lawrence and just removed him from the play. That's hard to do. So you run north-south, you run inside zone, you run duo, you run various iterations of double teams that get you north-south in a hurry. And that can help Pacheco in that you're telling him, look, this is your gap. This is where you're going. Follow that come hell or high water. That's more helpful than running some of this stuff that with outside zone, you're checking multiple gaps and you're looking for the cutback. Again, if you're basically asking him to make one read, that's probably what's best for him at this point. With Kareem Hunt, you can ask him to pick his way through multiple gaps, but you want that to be in the middle of the field. You don't want him trying to even stretch remotely to the edge because he's not fast enough to do it. Maybe do it like once or twice a game to keep them honest, but you can test the edge of the defense in other ways, like a jet sweep. And that's one thing you pointed out accurately. That's something they used to do a lot. The price you pay for that, depending on who you have in the room to execute jet sweep action, is you're giving up a receiver. I think they were more okay doing that when it was Mecole Hardman, and he's not a great route runner necessarily, not a big part of their passing game, but he's dangerous with the ball in his hands. Whereas when you do that with Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice is hurt, which is what they've been dealing with for the last couple of years, well, you're in a situation now, or if you're doing it with Rashee Rice in 2023, you're removing one of your better receiving options. And you just can't afford to do that. Tyreek Hill was unique in that he could do some jet sweep action stuff and still get onto a route. No one can do that. It requires a combination of explosiveness and quickness that's like limited to one guy in NFL history. So them going back to that was really interesting. And there were a couple different times that they utilized that against the Giants. One where they actually were running the ball the same direction as the jet sweep action, but it's threatening the edge. And you see the linebackers start to drift the wrong direction. And that pulls them entirely behind the line, gives Jawan Taylor a great angle. Pacheco gets an easy 7 or 8 yard gain. Another time they're running a jet sweep the opposite direction of a counter to Pacheco. And a counter is such a great run action off of a jet sweep because you're already faking right, you're heading left. Well, you've got your entire line blocking right, and you're running the jet sweep action to the right. Brashard Smith has shown he's explosive. The entire defense bit, including the guys that would have been setting the left edge, they dive up inside, and then easy gain for Pacheco that maybe could have gone for a little more, but I think it was Noah Gray pulling around the edge. He really wanted to make sure Juju was able to stick his block. If you got receivers that can block, Juju Smith-Schuster can block. When Rashee Rice is back, he can block. Those are the things they should be doing. And that jet sweep action, getting Brashard Smith the ball in space more and more, having him run more of those, it's just another way to get where you want to go. And it's got the side benefit, and this is another reason why I think they should be utilizing this more, especially from under center. It slows down the pass rush. You can help your tackles with jet sweep action just as much or more as you would with any kind of chip, because guys get too far up the field and they can't do anything because the jet sweeps run right by them. It's how they put Nick Bosa in Hades a couple different times in a couple different matchups. They just kept running jet sweeps to his side over and over again. So that's, utilizing that jet sweep action, utilizing more under center runs between the tackles, that's going to be really key for their success running the ball. And then with Pacheco, it's just been tough sledding for him. I do think they should increase Brashard Smith's volume just to see, or Elijah Mitchell's volume just to see what happens, because the results with Pacheco right now are not great or even good. He's really only getting the yards that are really readily available. And I just don't think it's anything that Smith probably couldn't execute in a run game, or Mitchell. So I think that's the personnel thing that you've got to do. So I think you do those things, and I think that could really help go a long ways towards the run game becoming more efficient again.
And that's where I struggle too. I saw somebody post like, hey, Pacheco might have had a few detrimental decisions, plays in that game, but he had a few decent runs. But the net, does the few good runs from him really outweigh what could have been the Giants possibly winning the game if Mahomes doesn't recover that fumble? I don't know if they would actually win the game, but they would have had the ball at the 5-yard line. And that's a big swing there. So I agree. They need to figure it out. But in theory, the Ravens are a good team to really just double down and say, we're just really going to try to run the ball because of their injuries along the interior. It was a walkthrough yesterday, but their entire almost starting interior did not they were a DNP during that estimated walkthrough. So you're really banged up. I hope they can try to find some success there. Another way that I hope they try to find success is just by saying, hey, we're going to keep targeting Tyquan Thornton. I looked at the film. He was not far off from having a few more catches for like 100 more yards and 2 more touchdowns in this game. Very close, only 3 games together with true rapport because he signed to the practice squad in November of last year. How encouraging is this rapport that's being built with Mahomes and Thornton, given the fact that it looks like they're intentionally trying to be aggressive? He's tied for second in deep shots. Mahomes is 20 air yards or more with 14, only behind Russell Wilson, who's on the bench now, who had 18. What are you seeing on the film there, and how could they use this kind of moving forward with Tyquan Thornton, given the fact also maybe Xavier Worthy is going to be playing in this game? All right, before we get to Seth's answer here, I do want to say if you are enjoying his content, this is where you're going to want to go to get even more. It's his Substack, the Chief in the North newsletter. He's dropping multiple articles every single week, and you can get a subscription to his Substack for 60% off, which is something insane, like $12 a year forever. Link to all that is in the description down below.
That's going to be huge, even if he's largely just there to maybe try to help pull coverage from elsewhere. What they've seen through 3 games is kind of a proof of concept with Thornton in that he can get behind the defense consistently. He can get behind the defense at a higher level than MVS could, certainly higher than Justin Watson. He's shown he's a legitimate deep threat. And one thing I would caution Chiefs fans about, because I hear a lot of people talking about Mahomes' deep ball, when you're throwing the deep ball a lot more, you're going to have more errant passes. It's just a 40-yard throw is a lot harder than a 5-yard throw. And so his deep ball accuracy rate actually isn't terrible. It's average-ish. That's kind of always been who he's been, to be perfectly honest. Thornton has played really, really well. He's had a couple of issues at the catch point where he's had a drop here, or he didn't win a contested one there. There was one down the right sideline against the Eagles that he really should have hauled in. He obviously should have hauled in a touchdown. Then, of course, the next play against the Giants made an incredible grab.
Even harder grab than the one before.
It was so much harder. The thing with him, with his hands, from what I've seen, and we actually saw this at the end of the first half when Mahomes didn't put the ball out as far in front of him as he should have. Still delivered a catchable ball. I think he was worried about overthrowing it, to be honest. And so that allowed the defensive back to close and make a play on the ball. And Thornton kind of let himself drift back rather than maybe slowing his route a little bit and coming to the ball strong. That was one that, a high level guy in terms of like strong hands would have probably hauled in. But again, Mahomes should have delivered a better ball too. So there's 6 1/2 dozen of the other there. But he doesn't survive contact incredibly well in terms of completing catches down the field. He can snatch the ball out of the air really well. We've seen that. But if there's contact with the defender of the ground, he at times doesn't have really strong hands. But he is opening up a ton down the field. Like, if you watch the film, it's not just the place he was targeted. There's multiple times he's opening up down the field. Now, sometimes he's on the backside of reads, and so, the read just never gets to him, or there's pressure or whatever. But he's consistently opening up down the field. That changes the entire dynamic for an offense. The Chiefs haven't had someone who has been a consistent downfield threat since maybe MVS in 2022. And even then, MVS is a guy, because he's kind of a slow burn, those first 10 yards. He's a guy that's a little easier to game plan for, to deal with that, because you can play off man coverage. You do that against Tyquan Thornton, and he's not great at it, but he's adequate at it. He can run a 7-yard speed out and collect 7 of the easiest yards you've ever seen in your life. And he did that against the Giants. It was 2nd and 2, so they're playing way off him because 2nd and 2 is a shot play. They play way off him, and I don't know whether they checked to it or it was the play call. Thornton just runs a speed out, and boom, 7 yards. So easy. So those things are going to start coming to him too, and you see teams starting to play him a different way. I've been really encouraged by him. I don't think he has wide receiver 1 potential, but right now, I think he's playing like a really high level wide receiver 3 with a very specific role in the deep ball. And you can see him continuing to progress to being more of a wide receiver 2 type. That ability to stretch the field, big plays win football games, but the way they affect defenses also win football games. And so seeing him next to Worthy would be really great because of the combination of those skill sets next to Kelsey, next to Brown, next to Juju, in terms of people who can win a little bit shallow and intermediate. You can really legitimately threaten all three levels of the field without sacrificing Xavier Worthy to do it. So where Xavier Worthy won the most in college was on some of those intermediate routes. I mean, he was a good deep threat. His intermediate stuff was excellent. This is a chance to use them that way because you can have Taekwon running over the top, line them up on the same side of the field, and force the quarters defenders to make some really tough decisions. Because if you're running quarters and you've got Worthy in the slot and Thornton on the boundary, that means you've got two deep defenders there to deal with two of the fastest guys in the NFL. That means there's no help. So you run one post and one go, see who wins. I think Thornton should be one of the primary foundational parts of their game plan until Rice is back. And then I would put him as wide receiver 3 behind Rice and Worthy because his skill set doesn't overlap as much as Hollywood Brown's. And they could be in a really, really, really strong position at that point.
I'm very excited about the idea of that. Rice returns, what he can do, quick passes, yards after the catch, bully, breaking tackles, and stuff that the Chiefs just don't really have right now. But that threat combined with what Thornton's doing, if Worthy is able to play through the season, the shoulder injury, but then all that also takes some pressure off of Travis Kelce, and you're not trying to funnel the offense through Travis Kelce at the age of 35. And he's playing well. He's had some mistakes. I feel like he's moving better than last year if we're just comparing how he's moving around. But funneling through Kelce has been it's been difficult and not ideal. With that being said, Mahomes said in his presser he wants to go from completing 1 to 2 deep shots a game to 3 to 4, hopefully even 5 to 6. And that's going to do some...
Pump those numbers up.
That's going to do wonders for this offense, especially with the struggles in the running back room. I saw a graph recently where, I don't know if you saw it, but Mahomes was at the very bottom left on checkdown rate, but then EPA per play, I think, from those checkdowns, which really means Mahomes isn't getting any help at all. And that's, I think, why he's probably being forced to target deeper downfield, because it's like, well, you either check it down and do nothing with it, or you chuck one to Tyquan Thornton and he might actually haul it in.
Absolutely. And that's really, honestly, now their EPA per play has been really tanked by those two to Pacheco. And I, like you said, those have been talked about ad nauseum. He literally turned the wrong way both times. That's really rough. That's why you can see Mahomes kind of almost trying to hold on to the ball as he's making the throw, because it's like he's got no reason. With a check down, the ball's coming out immediately, so you turn and throw. You can almost see him like, dude, what are you doing? Look, Pacheco's in a tough spot. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully he improves. Good teammate, good dude. The thing is, whether it's him or whether it's Hunt, neither of them break tackles in space. How many times have you watched other NFL games over the last couple weeks and you see a running back get the ball in space on a check down and it's him one-on-one against a defender and they either win a race to the sideline and gain 10 yards or break a tackle and gain 10 yards or, plow through them and gain 10 yards. There's just different things that they do. Whereas with Hunt and Pacheco, they are not able to do any of that. You check down to them, it's like a 3-yard gain. That's another reason why the Smith thing or the Mitchell thing is kind of a tough thing, where you're just like, they need more juice from that room. It genuinely affects them because it lowers the floor of the offense on checkdowns. And I do think that's part of why he's throwing the ball deeper. They clearly, though, they haven't had a deep threat like Thornton in years, and they are enjoying it. And I think knowing Mahomes is pretty intentional with things that he says. I think they know. I've already seen a little bit of a difference. The Giants were playing a little more too deep. They were being a little more careful with Thornton at times. I think you're going to see that continue as the Chiefs continue to move forward, because teams can't afford to give up 1 or 2 deep shots a game to someone, and especially if they're going to keep throwing. Teams are lucky, the teams they've played so far, that it hasn't been 3 or 4, because Mahomes and Thornton have missed each other a few times. You just can't afford to give those up because they're game tilting plays, especially when you're playing a team that overall can be somewhat efficient, grinding yards out and creating. You start giving up shot plays to that same team with a quarterback that can convert third downs at a really high rate. Now you're in trouble. So I think what you're going to see ideally, and I think Mahomes maybe is trying to push towards this, is teams playing a lot more too high safety sets, going kind of back to the way people used to talk about the way everyone played the Chiefs, all these conservative shells, which opened up all this underneath stuff. Over the last couple of years, even when the Chiefs run empty and are spreading out the backfield, they've got the backfield, and they've got a running back out wide, and they're completely empty. Teams are still not feeling the need to run two deep shells. They are instead just crushing everything within 5 to 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, knowing that no one's going to make them pay for it. And then when that stuff isn't open immediately, Mahomes has nowhere to go. And then, because you've only got 5 offensive linemen blocking, things blow up. Now they've got better left tackle play. And now they've got a legitimate deep threat. You can run empty more, and they still got to stay in that too high shell, and they got to keep those safeties back, which means you've got less of a numbers game at the intermediate and shallow levels. So there's a lot that they can do with this. It's all on paper right now, but you can see some of it playing out against the Giants in the second half, even without Worthy on the field, with Juju Smith-Schuster getting a little bit of action and that kind of stuff, and Hollywood Brown getting a little bit of stuff shallow and intermediate. So that's the idea. Now we just need to see it play out.
Yeah, and the argument there was, well, the Giants' defense isn't good outside of their D-line. Okay, well, the Ravens' defense is giving up some of the most points, yards per play. Any metric you could look at on defense, they're really Jekyll and Hyde. That offense is very high-powered. I think the number 1 scoring offense in the NFL right now, but their defense is 31st, 32nd. So hopefully they can find some success there on offense for the Chiefs, because I think you're going to need to put up points if you want to beat the Ravens. What is your most glaring concern with the defense if you had to pick one heading into this game based on what you've seen so far? Obviously, you're going to try to do all you can to contain Lamar, watch out for Henry. But if there's one concern you want to see improved upon based on Eagles, Giants, and then heading into week 4 here, if you had to pick one, what would it be? And what do you hope to see a little differently or just better executed?
It's still the same thing that it's been all season. After the first week, I would say we were talking about the safeties a lot. Cook and Hicks in particular have played a lot better since then. Shamari Connor's played a lot better when he's not being asked to be a slot corner. We've seen a lot of improvement there, which is great. And so I want to see more from the front 4 pass rush. It's the same thing. I noticed they had Leo Chanel in there a little more just because, Spags just wants that pushed. He wants that pocket pushed, which I thought was interesting. Chanel's never shown any pass rush moves whatsoever, but he's really strong. And so if you just want the pocket pushed, fair enough. I'm not sure if they'll do that against the Giants or against the Ravens. That might have been unique to the Giants. But the front 4 generating pressure on its own. And that's a very different thing than the front 4 collecting pressures, like as a stat. I saw someone share that Karlaftis has a lot of pressures on the season, and a lot of those came against the Giants. One thing I would just say is not all pressures are created equal. There's a pressure that comes from winning your one-on-one and pressuring the quarterback. But there's a pressure that comes when the quarterback is flushed and heads towards you and then you pursue. That's a lot of what Karlaftis has done this year. Or it's a coverage pressure where the coverage holds up for 5 seconds and then you start to win through with motor because you've been one-on-one for 5 seconds. I want to see faster wins from Karlaftis. I'm glad he's been more on track. He really struggled in weeks 1 or 2. Week 3 went a lot better for him. That's great to see. But I want to see more from him individually. I want to see more from Amenahu individually. I want to see Gelati get something going. And then, Chris Jones, he turned it up a little bit against the Giants as well. He has not had as much success defeating all the attention as he has previous years. So that's just something to keep an eye on. They really have asked him to carry the weight of the pass rush for so many years. And so seeing them get more without having to blitz so much, we saw that against the Giants. That was nice. And you saw the difference it made. So that's really my biggest concern with Noel Williams emerging. Hopefully Christian Fulton can start to get healthy. But Noel Williams looks like a Spags corner. That would be huge because now you got Watson and you got Williams. Get McDuffie in the slot. Hicks and Connor and Cook are all playing better. So the coverage has been looking good. The middle of the field is always going to be a bit of a question. But that front 4 pass rush, I want to see more consistent pressure. This probably isn't really the game to look for it, to be perfectly honest, because against Lamar, you are always you're not really pressuring to get sacks. You're pressuring to get him to step up, and then you shoestring tackle him with like a yard behind the line of scrimmage, which is technically a sack. But that was a lot of what Detroit was able to do. They were able to get some pressure, force him to step up, and then pursued really well. So it's just a very different, that's one of his huge strengths, is how much he neuters opposing pass rushes, because they're just so scared to get out of their pass rush lane. So I do want to see them get more push and finish. They've been able to do it against Lamar in the past. It'll be interesting to see. My guess is Spags probably has some stuff cooked up in terms of blitzes there that kind of shut off escape valves.
The fact that the Lions sacked him 7 times, I was completely mind blown. Apparently, they had 1 to 2 spies in the second half and were just kind of sitting back there waiting for him to run, but also they were kind of in the shallow area of coverage. And Lamar just said on some of his sacks this week, he was like, yeah, I just was waiting for guys to get open and wasn't able to make it work. So that'll be interesting, something to watch. How are you feeling about this game for the Chiefs? They are 2.5-point underdogs at home. You look at most of the analysts, they're picking all but one on the NFL's official preview on YouTube. All but one are picking the Ravens to win. How confident are you that the Chiefs could pull off a W if they execute at a higher level? Like, where's your mind at with the team based on who they're playing and the Ravens heading into Sunday?
I think of this game as essentially a coin flip. It is interesting to see the difference in the way teams are talked about, because both teams have lost to 2 good teams in pretty close games and beaten 1 bad team. But one team has its offense playing well and its defense playing poorly. One team has its defense playing well and its offense playing poorly. Although by EPA per play, the offense isn't playing nearly as poorly in Kansas City as the defense is playing in Baltimore. But the vibes are totally different, right? The way the national media talks about Baltimore right now versus the way Kansas City gets talked about are very, very different. I actually agree. Nick Wright made a comment that like the Chiefs really want to win this game. It's really important for them. The Ravens kind of need to. The Chiefs, even if the Chiefs start off the season 1-3, they've got the right stuff, the worthy stuff, the idea, look, we've been here before. We're going to be fine, maybe because they've got some tough games coming up. But I think they could dig their way out of it. The Ravens, I mean, they don't have a very strong division, but man, starting off 1-3, you can start to see things implode, especially when you haven't been there quite the same way the Chiefs have year after year. I like the Chiefs' chances a bit. I think it's a really tough matchup, but they've generally defended Lamar pretty well as anyone can. He's a great player. And Baltimore's defense does look vulnerable. For me, I want to see them build on some of the stuff they were doing on offense against the Giants and cut down on the self-inflicted wounds. The self-inflicted wounds in the first 2 games killed them. And in the first half, you cut down on those, not even completely, just by half or by a quarter. And it changes so much. So I like their chances if they go out and execute. If they continue to shoot themselves in the foot, Baltimore's too good. You're not going to be able to hang around quite the same way you did against the Giants.
That's exactly what I said heading into the Eagles game. If you can execute at a higher level, you're probably going to win. And they actually almost still won despite like multiple costly errors. The coaching decision to go for it in their own territory, Butker missing a field goal, and then the Kelsey tipped up, should have been touchdown, turned INT into an Eagles touchdown a few plays later. So yeah, if you could execute at a little bit of a higher level, how concerned are you about Harrison Butker almost missing 5 kicks in 3 games? One was a doink that he made, but he's missed 2 extra points, 2 field goals, very small sample size. You think he's going to right the ship here?
I'm pre-nervous. We've seen him have some early season struggles before. He came into this season, I believe, as the most accurate kicker in NFL history. He had a few things last year that I think have us a little twitchy. We'll see if it turns into a yips situation, because when that happens, it happens fast. So I'm pre-nervous. I'm one more miss away from being full-blown nervous. It would be really great, like, if he goes all game this week, makes a couple field goals, makes, 3 extra points, which for one, that would be great because that means the Chiefs put up at least 27. If they do that, and then I'll start to breathe a little bit easier. But I need to see a couple weeks of him looking like himself, because some of the misses, they just really haven't looked right either. So we'll kind of see what happens. He's been doing it long enough that, kind of similar to Kelsey or Mahomes with some of the plays they weren't making the first couple weeks, I kind of assume it's going to come back around, but we'll see.
All these close games, every point matters when the Chiefs are having to gut out these 1-score wins. And that's kind of been the difference of they were 10-0 last year in 1-score games, and they lost their first 2 by 1 score. You didn't execute at the highest level in the most crucial of situations. Guys, you need to subscribe to Seth's Substack, the Chief in the North newsletter. It is excellent. He's putting out content all the time, multiple times a week, and you give great analysis that the average fan can understand, and I lump myself into that category, so I can read your stuff and be like, oh, wow, that's very easy to digest and take away. So I appreciate all the work you do. Thanks so much for hopping on again. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Hey, I always appreciate you having me. This is always a blast.
How about those?